that the old lazy-minded lie that the Constitution says that women's place is in the home is wholly untrue. The Chairman of the Electoral Commission has said it's untrue, but government ministers, in particularly the Green Party minister and various ministers and others, propagate this lie that the Constitution somehow says that women's place is in the home. The heavily state-funded National Women's Council of Ireland, which depends largely on government handouts to exist, is propagating that lie as well. And I think it's about time that the disinformation campaign coming from government ministers and government-sponsored agencies stops.
So obviously the government are pushing a yes vote in this referendum, and what they've been saying is that for example, I was just speaking to Education Minister Norma Foley, and she said that the Constitution, by saying that women have duties in the home, it's effectively relegating them to a household or a domestic role. Do you have any position on that?
Well, I don't know how much Norma Foley knows about the Constitution, but if you read the leading textbooks on the Constitution, leading members of the Supreme Court have always said that men as parents also have duties in the home, and the Constitution should be read as meaning that as well. So this is really just to do with symbols, and it's a Green Party agenda. It was in their electoral manifesto. They insisted that the government establish a citizens forum. It's been chaired by a person who was supposed to be an independent chairman and is now heading the National Women's Council of Ireland Yes campaign. I object to all of that. And what happened in the Oireachtas is that there was no pre-legislative scrutiny, there was no opportunity to get in people, say, from the Department of Finance to say what effect will this have on taxation, what effect from Department of Justice officials to say what effect will this have on succession law, what effect will it have on pension law, what effect will it have on immigration law. The members of the Oireachtas were denied that opportunity by a guillotine motion, which meant that each bill had 3 hours to discuss amendments in the Senate, which gave 60 members effectively 3 minutes each, and the government swept aside all the amendments by a single blanket vote saying the bills are deemed to have passed.
Well, you mentioned the range of impacts that this constitutional change could theoretically have, and the government has been very quick to dismiss many of these. For example, Taoiseach Leo Varadkar just recently said that the notion that the referendum to redefine the family could have an impact on immigration law is overblown, and that this is sort of a red herring that has nothing to do with the actual substance of the debate, because of course last year Junior Minister Neil Richmond said that it could potentially have an impact on family reunification laws and so on, and so many people who are campaigning for a no vote have raised this as a concern.
But when I want to get to the key point of changing what the definition of family is, this is moving to not just modern time vernacular, but it has serious consequences, particularly when we think of immigration law and proving that someone is family member or family reunification. This will allow that to be accommodated as well. So we're keeping up to space with other communities.
Because you're talking about durable relationships.
Absolutely, yeah.
Is this?
Do you think that this could have an impact on immigration law?
Well, Neil Richmond said a serious consequence, and that's his exact word of changing the definition of family would be its effect on immigration law. He said that on The Tonight Show in front of the Irish people. And at roughly the same time, the Irish Independent, and you can check this out, it's available online, and I posted it again. They carried a story saying that the government was being warned about this by officials. They didn't say who the officials were, but I think it's probable that they were Department of Justice officials.
Now, in defence of the government's position, might they say that certainly there will be an increase in claims on the basis of family reunification, but that the government doesn't have to accept those claims, and that, for example, I believe it's the 2015 Immigration Act outlines which relatives are allowed to be brought to Ireland under family reunification, and so effectively the government would still control our national immigration policy, and that a constitutional change would have no bearing on that. What would you say if a government minister was to make that argument?
I reject that completely. people will be entitled, if they are in what the courts define as a durable relationship, to invoke their family rights under the Constitution on an equal basis with people who are married. And therefore people who aren't married in the eyes of the Irish law will constitute families with family rights. And these are inalienable and imprescriptible rights guaranteed by the Constitution. And I think it's entirely naive of the government to think that the extensive group of lawyers who act on behalf of asylum seekers will not invoke their family status to challenge any effort to disregard their durable relationships in the future.
So in a nutshell then, you would say that if this constitutional change was to pass, there's a very real prospect legally that we could see a significant increase in asylum seekers bringing relatives to Ireland?
Well, at the very least, it'll give them a considerable legal step on which to bring cases to court. That will entail huge delays. And as we know, a previous Supreme Court decision has given asylum seekers the right to work after 6 months. So economic migrants, it'll be in their interest to use this amendment to make an argument in court that they are entitled to family protection. Many, many people in Ireland are becoming more and more concerned about the migration issue and the confusion of migration and asylum seeking. And Roderick O'Gorman is now, very late in the day, beginning to admit that 60% of people seeking international protection in Ireland are not entitled to it. But that 60% is of a huge sum of money.
The other argument that the government has dismissed repeatedly is the argument around thruples and polygamous relationships. The Minister for Equality, Roderick O'Gorman, has said that that won't have any bearing on the current redefinition of family, to say that it's based on durable relationships and that the Constitution wouldn't allow for that with the new change.
A polygamous relationship would not be protected under that. First of all, because polygamous relationships have never been recognised under Irish law, and secondly, because a polygamous relationship is not one that represents a fundamental unit group of society, and it is not one that represents a moral institution in Irish law. And it is not one that it represents as durable. So So the very clear policy intention of the government is that whether it's a polygamous relationship, I've heard the words thruples thrown around, that issue has come up in some of the debates, so we're very clear such a relationship is not covered within the concept of durability, and it's not covered in the expanded concept of the family.
Do you have a view on that particular issue? He
has asserted that, and I don't for 1 minute think that it will legalise bigamy. But what I do believe is that, say, a Nigerian man who is living in a bigamous relationship with 2 women in Nigeria migrates to Ireland with his 2 wives and their children. I think it's entirely reasonable to think that when the courts come to look at whether he and his 2 wives and their 5 children are a family and whether they have a durable relationship, it would be, in my view, perverse of the courts to say it's not a durable relationship when it could have lasted for 10 or 15 years.
So why do you think the minister so confidently dismissed the notion then that this could be a legal reality? Why was he so adamant that this couldn't happen and wouldn't happen?
He's mixing up a number of things. This doesn't legalise polygamy in one sense, but it requires the state, and it'll require the courts, when they are confronted with a polygamous relationship, to adjudicate whether there are any family rights for the people involved in that relationship, no matter how long it's lasted, no matter how many children there are living in that home. It'll be a huge challenge for the court to say this isn't durable, because all of the existing case law in relation to whether such arrangements are recognised in Irish law depend on the fact that the state at the moment only recognises families based on matrimony.
So I suppose then that would raise also the issue of tax law, as you mentioned earlier, when it comes to even potentially things like inheritance and so on. Would you have any view on how it might impact those sorts of issues?
Well, there's a whole series of issues, very obvious issues when you think about them. If two people marry, gay or straight, it doesn't matter, they're entitled to a totally differential tax regime from unmarried people at the moment. Husbands are able to give to wives and wives to husbands money without any capital gains tax or any arrangements of that kind. They're entitled to a gift to each other, etc., etc., etc. It's blindingly obvious that if people are cohabitants, they're going to go to lawyers and say, how come my family is paying 3 times as much tax because I haven't married? If you go back to the O'Mara case, where Mr. O'Mara and his wife, his late wife, she didn't want to be to go through matrimony for her own personal reasons, but he was nonetheless entitled on equality grounds to challenge the failure of the Irish state to grant him a widower's pension. Which was previously confined to married people. And the same logic will apply across the board. Once you say that a durable relationship, it can found a family, and you're going to say that the family is an important unit group in society, how can you say, only people who've gone to a church or a register office are entitled to family recognition for tax purposes, when the whole point of this referendum is to accord family recognition to people who are not married.
So then yesterday, when Public Expenditure Minister Paschal Donoghue said categorically that he did not believe the referendum, of yes vote in the referendum, would have any impact on the exchequer and tax take and so on.
Are you confident that any change to the Constitution that may occur as a result of the referendums, there is no additional tax implications for the exchequer?
Yes, I am. I'm absolutely clear that the tax status of these key issues will not be affected, and tax policy will continue to be dealt with by the Oireachtas in the way it has been.
Again, would you have any response to that claim by the Minister?
I think it's absolutely false. I think that in the future it is almost inevitable that people in a durable relationship are going to say, how come a newly married couple get treated one way and me and my spouse and our 4 children get treated in a much less favourable way? And you just have to look at the O'Mara case to realise the state will have to prove that it's not an invidious discrimination between people in breach of their equality rights. I want to add this, that government ministers, particularly Roderick O'Gorman, but the Taoiseach and other ministers, Paschal Donoghue and others, have said that the definition of durable relationship is a matter for the courts. How do the courts decide cases? They decide cases where there's a dispute between 2 people. They don't sit down together and get all the judges together and say, this is what we're going to do in future. They're going to look at individual cases. And the chairman of the Electoral Commission has said it's going to be hard cases. And you're going to have a situation, for instance, where a man who owns a farm has left it to his nephew, who's worked the land with him for many, many years. And on the other hand, in his later years, he's struck up a non-marital relationship with, a woman and has had a child by her. Well, what is the effect of that durable relationship on the will he made for the nephew? If you get married, people don't realise this, you revoke all wills you made prior to your marriage. And your spouse, under the Succession Act, has specific rights. Are you going to be able to say that durable relationship partners are not going to have succession rights on an equal basis with spouses? And at the moment we have a cohabitation law which dates back to 2010. And the Oireachtas has provided that certain very limited rights can be asserted by cohabitants at the end of a relationship or the death of their partner if they've lived together for 5 years, or if they've lived together and have a child after 2 years. But that's going to be swept away, and in future it's going to be decided simply on the basis of is this a durable relationship, is it a family, All of the uncertainty that goes with that will only be resolved by case law, where people actually are forced into court to argue about their rights.
I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I wanted to touch on, I believe you had an FOI request rejected by the Minister for Equality's department. I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about that.
Well, the Senate Independent Group requested minutes of the interdepartmental group, which had met on 16 occasions to consider all of the issues involved in the wording. And
so this would have been the minutes to decide why the referendum has the wording that it has.
Exactly. And the Taoiseach then launches the Fine Gael campaign with a press conference, and he says, there were ups and downs and pros and cons all discussed at length before this wording was rushed through in a matter of hours.
You requested to see the minutes that were going to lay out what the reasoning had been for the current referendums and their particular wording, and they rejected that. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong,
they gave grounds for rejecting our request, and they said it wouldn't be in the public interest for the public to have access to this information, because it could involve the public becoming aware of what public officials thought were the merits of the case one way or the other.
Oh, so they were saying that it would be in violation of kind of a neutrality.
So the public interest is that the public are kept in the dark and do not know things, because otherwise their judgment might be affected by seeing these minutes, and that is grotesque. And the suggestion that the state's constitutional obligations require it to suppress this information so that people will vote on it in a state of ignorance is completely unsupportable.
We've seen from polling that it looks as though both referendums are set to pass by a relatively comfortable margin. Do you have any predictions for how you think this vote is going to go?
I'm confident it'll be defeated by a substantial majority, and anybody who relies on opinion polls should remember what happened in relation to Seanad Éireann. On the Monday before the Thursday that the vote was taken on that, the Irish Times published a poll which showed it sailing through, and the participants in the poll said they were sure to vote. On the day, the Seanad was saved, and I'm convinced that on this occasion it's the people who care who'll come out to vote, the people who are determined not to be bamboozled by the government who'll come out to vote, and the great majority of people at the moment have limited access to the underlying facts and to what it's all about. But the Irish Times itself conceded that the more people knew, the more likely to be no voters.
So you would anticipate then that a lack of enthusiasm on the pro-referendum side will lead to its downfall?
No, I'm not just relying on apathy. I'm relying on people who do understand the issue